Hey guys, tonight we plunge into the wild, wine-soaked world of medieval wedding, where sacred rituals and rowdy feasts collide in a whirlwind of silk, sweat, and sacred vows. Picture this. You're standing in a muddy village square, the air thick with the scent of roasted boar and spilled wine, as a bride in a crimson gown steps forward, her hands trembling under the weight of a jeweled veil. Torches flicker, casting shadows on a crowd buzzing with gossip and laughter. It's chaotic, it's holy, and let's be honest, you probably won't survive the 3-hour prayer marathon without sneaking a nap. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Drop a comment with your location and local time. I'd love to know where you're chilling tonight. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're in the heart of a 14th century English village, where the wedding of a merchant's daughter to a miner knight's son is about to unfold. The year is roughly 1350, and the Black Death shadow still lingers, making this celebration feel like a defiant middle finger to mortality. The square is alive with color. Banners of azure and gold flutter from wooden beams, and children dart to the crowd, snatching bits of honeyed bread. You're jostled by villagers in ruffled tunics and a few pompous nobles in velvet, their belts jangling with silver. The wine! Oh, the wine! It's everywhere. Wooden casks line the edges of the square, and servants pour it into clay cups with reckless abandon. It's not the fancy Pinot you're used to. This is rough, tart stuff, probably spiked with herbs to mask its questionable quality. You take a sip, and it burns your throat like a monk's overzealous sermon. This isn't just a party. It's a spectacle rooted in centuries of tradition. The mainstream fact here is that medieval weddings, especially in England, were often public affairs held at the church porch, not inside the sanctuary. The community had to witness the vows to make them legit, a holdover from Anglo-Saxon customs that valued transparency over romance. You see the groom, a lanky lad named Thomas, sweating in his best doublet, his face a mix of pride and terror. His bride, Agnes, stands poised, her eyes darting the crowd. You can't help but wonder if she's thrilled or just counting the minutes until this is over. But here's the quirky bit. Some couples, especially in rural areas, believe drinking wine from the same cup during betrothal seal their bond against evil spirits. You watch as a grizzled old woman, probably the village wise woman, hands Thomas and Agnes a chipped goblet filled with dark red liquid. They sip awkwardly, wine dribbling down their chins, and the crowd cheers like it's a divine PowerPoint presentation. Historians still argue whether this shared cup ritual was widespread or just a regional quirk. Some say it was pure superstition. Others claim it symbolized economic unity, since wine was pricey. You weave through the crowd, dodging a farmer who's already 3 cups deep and singing about a lost cow. The air hums with anticipation, but there's an edge to it. Weddings weren't just about love. They were business deals, social ladders, and divine contracts all rolled into one. Thomas's family likely haggled for months over Agnes's dowry. Maybe a few acres, a chest of linens, or a cow that hasn't gone missing yet. You notice the bride's father, a stout merchant with a beard like a hedgehog, eyeing the groom's kin with suspicion. Trust is as thin as the ale in the cheaper taverns. The wine keeps flowing, and so does the chaos. A juggler tosses apples, one smacking a noble's hat clean off. Oops, there's your first laugh of the night. You spot a dog snatching a sausage from a table, its tail wagging like it just won the lottery. The scene feels alive, almost too much, and you're swept up in it. The church looms ahead, its stone walls promising a shift from this rowdy prelude to something holier. But for now, you're caught in a swirl of voices, the clink of cups and the scent of wine-soaked earth. You're not just a guest. You're part of the story, teetering between revelry and ritual. As the crowd thickens, you hear a horn blast, signaling the start of the formalities. The bridesmaids, giggling and flushed, begin to gather, their hands full of ribbons and herbs. You're about to see the first ritual, something intricate and older than the hills. But don't get too cozy. That prayer marathon is coming, and it's going to test your soul's stamina. For now, let the wine warm your bones and the laughter lift your spirits. This is a medieval wedding, and you're in for a wild ride. You're still buzzing from the wine-soaked chaos of the village square, where the wedding's opening act unfolded like a medieval reality show. Now, the crowd's energy shifts, and you're drawn toward a small, thatched house where the bride, Agnes, is about to undergo one of the day's most intimate rituals. The air smells of lavender and wood smoke, and you duck under a low doorway into a dimly lit room. Candlelight flickers on rough plaster walls, and a gaggle of women, sisters, cousins, and neighbors huddle around Agnes, their voices a softness of chatter and giggles. You're here for the ceremonial hair braiding, a tradition so old it feels like it was carved into the earth itself. It's not just about looking pretty. It's a sacred act laced with meaning and a pinch of superstition. The room is warm, almost stifling, and you settle onto a wooden bench. Try not to knock over a jug of ale someone left precariously close to the edge. Agnes sits on a stool, her crimson gown pooling around her like spilled wine. Her hair, long and chestnut brown, spills over her shoulders, catching the candlelight. Two older women, probably her aunts, begin combing it with bone combs, their movements slow and deliberate. You notice the younger girls weaving in ribbons of blue and gold, colors of fidelity and wealth, though you suspect the merchant's family picked them to flex their status. The mainstream historical fact is that hair braiding was a key part of medieval wedding preparations, especially in Western Europe. It symbolized the bride's transition from maiden to wife, a public declaration of her new role, much like a modern wedding dress. But here's the quirky tidbit. Some villages believed the braiding had to be done by married women to transfer their wifely wisdom to the bride. You overhear one aunt muttering about how a poorly tied braid could invite bad luck, like a barren womb or a wandering husband. The younger girls roll their eyes, but Agnes looks nervous, her fingers twisting in her lap. Historians still argue whether these superstitions were taken seriously or just playful traditions. Some say they were heartfelt. Others think they were excuses for older women to boss everyone around. You watch as the braiding continues, each strand tugged and woven with care. The women sing softly, a tune about a maiden and a river, their voices blending into a soothing drone. It's almost hypnotic, but then a cousin drops a ribbon, and the room erupts in laughter. Your first chuckle of the section. "Clumsy as a drunk ox," teases one girl, and you can't help but grin. The mood is light, but there's weight here too. Agnes isn't just getting dolled up. She's being remade, her old self unraveled and rewoven into something new. You wonder what she's thinking. Does she love Thomas, or is she just a pawn in her father's trade deals? Medieval marriages were often more about alliances and romance, and you bet she's feeling the pressure. The women start pinning flowers into the braids, daisies and rosemary, for purity and remembrance. You catch a whiff of the herbs, sharp and earthy, and it mingles with the scent of melted wax. Someone passes you a cup of watered-down wine, and you sip it, wincing at its vinegary bite. Outside, you hear the faint clamor of the square, shouts, a lute's twang, maybe that juggler dropping another apple. It's a reminder that the world beyond this room is still spinning. But here, time feels slower, almost sacred. One of the aunts begins telling a story about her own wedding, how her braid was so tight she thought her scalp would bleed. The girls giggle, but you notice Agnes's smile is forced. She's young, maybe 16, and you can't shake the feeling she's carrying more than just flowers in her hair. The braiding is nearly done now. The final ribbons knotted with a flourish. The women step back, admiring their work, and Agnes looks like a queen, albeit one who'd rather be anywhere else. You're struck by how personal this feels, like you're intruding on a private moment, yet it's also a performance of the community waiting outside. The quirky superstition kicks in again as the oldest woman sprinkles a pinch of salt over Agnes's head, muttering something about warding off fairies. You stifle a laugh. Fairies, really? But the others nod solemnly. It's a reminder that this world is layered with beliefs you'll never fully grasp. The salt scatters on the floor, and a cat darts out from under a table, snagging a laugh from the room. Bad luck already, jokes a cousin, and you're at your second chuckle. As the women start fussing over Agnes's veil, you lean back, taking it all in. The braiding isn't just a ritual. It's a bridge between the chaos of the feast and the solemnity of the church. You remember that shared wine cup in the square, how it sealed Thomas and Agnes's betrothal with a clumsy sip. This feels like its counterpart, a quieter promise woven into every strand. The women begin to hum again, and you feel your eyelids grow heavy. It's not just the wine or the warmth. It's the rhythm of this moment, pulling you deeper into the story. The door creaks open, and a boy pokes his head in, shouting that the priest is ready. The women shoo him away, but the spell is broken. Agnes stands, her braids gleaming, and the group begins to move toward the door. You follow, your heart oddly full, as the scent of rosemary lingers in the air. The church is next, and you know it's going to be a marathon of prayers and vows. For now, though, you carry the memory of this room, where laughter, superstition, and sisterhood wove a girl into a bride. You step out from the warm, candlelit cocoon of the braiding ritual, blinking into the midday sun as the crowd sweeps you toward the church. The village square hums with life, but all eyes are on Agnes, her braided hair glinting under a gossamer veil. You jostle along a dirt path, the scent of crushed herbs and sweaty wool filling your nose. The church looms ahead, its stone walls weathered but proud, its porch a stage for the day's holiest moment. You're about to witness the public vows, where Thomas and Agnes will bind their lives before God and a nosy crowd. It's less a private I do and more a community contract, sealed under the open sky. The porch is packed, villagers cramming shoulder to shoulder, some perched on barrels for a better view. You find a spot near a gnarled oak, its shade a small mercy in the heat. The priest, a wiry man with a face like a disappointed hawk, stands under the church's arched doorway, clutching a leather-bound book. His robe is frayed, but his voice carries authority as he calls for silence. The mainstream historical fact is that medieval weddings in England often took place at the church porch, not inside, a tradition rooted in canon law to ensure public consent. The church wanted no secret marriages. Every vow had to be seen and heard, like a medieval live stream. Agnes and Thomas stand side by side, their hands clasped tightly, as if anchoring each other against the crowd's gaze. You notice Thomas's boots are scuffed, probably borrowed from his older brother, and Agnes's veil flutters in the breeze, threatening to escape. The priest drones a Latin blessing, and you catch maybe one word in 10. Good thing you're not being quizzed. The crowd murmurs, some in awe, others whispering about the dowry or Thomas's rumored fondness for ale. You overhear a quirky tidbit. In some regions, couples tied a knot in a rope during the vows, believing it literally tied their souls together. You spot a coarse hemp cord in the priest's hand, and sure enough, he loops it loosely around their wrists. The crowd cheers, though you're not sure if it's a knot or because someone just passed out more wine. Historians still argue whether these public vows were about love or duty. Some say they were heartfelt pledges. Others insist they were political theater, with families like Agnes's merchant clan using weddings to climb social ladders. You can see both sides. Thomas looks at Agnes like she's the only person here, but her father's smug grin suggests he's just secured a trade deal with legs. The priest raises his hands, and the crowd hushes. You lean forward, straining to hear the vows. Agnes speaks first, her voice steady but soft. promising to obey and honor. Thomas follows, stumbling over forsaking all others, and you stifle a chuckle, first laugh of the section. His nerves are too relatable. The knot-tying ritual wraps up, and the priest sprinkles holy water, some of it splashing your tunic. It's cold and you flinch, earning a smirk from a nearby kid. There's your second laugh. The crowd's energy is electric, but there's tension too. A few men in the back, probably rival suitors or disgruntled cousins, mutter darkly, their cups sloshing. Weddings could spark feuds as easily as alliances, and you're glad you're just a bystander. The air smells of wax and incense now, the church's presence grounding the chaos. You glance at Agnes, her face pale but composed, and wonder she's dreaming of a quiet life or bracing for a storm. The vows done, the crowd erupts, tossing dried flowers that stick to your hair like medieval confetti. You brush them off, grinning at the absurdity. The priest gestures toward the church doors, signaling the next phase. Hours of prayers await inside. You remember that shared wine cup in the square, its sticky sweetness, and the braids woven with rosemary and whispers. Those moments feel distant now, replaced by the weight of this public stage. The knot around their wrists is undone, but you can't shake the feeling it's left an invisible mark. As you shuffle toward the church, someone hands you a crust of bread slathered with honey, hospitality, or a bribe to keep quiet about the ale-soaked uncle now snoring under a tree. You take a bite, the sweetness cutting through the dust in your throat. The crowd's chatter swells, and you catch snippets of gossip. Someone swears Agnes's veil was imported from Flanders. Others bet Thomas will drink himself under the table by dusk. You laugh quietly. Third chuckle, imagining him face down in a pie. The church doors creak open, and the crowd surges forward, eager for the next act. You're swept along, your heart pounding with the strange mix of solemnity and celebration. The porch vows were just a beginning. Now, you're bracing for the marathon of faith inside. You shuffle into the church. The cool stone walls a sharp contrast to the sun-baked porch outside, where Agnes and Thomas just tied their souls with a hemp knot and trembling vows. The air inside smells of damp earth and old incense, with a faint whiff of the crowd's sweat trailing you. Pews creak as villagers cram in, some still clutching wine cups, their whispers echoing off the vaulted ceiling. You find a spot near a cracked stained glass window, its reds and blues casting jagged light on your hands. The priest, that hawk-faced man, stands at the altar, his voice already droning in Latin. You're about to endure the 3-hour prayer marathon, a test of faith and stamina that makes your modern binge-watching sessions look like a sprint. Buckle up. This is where medieval devotion gets real. The mainstream historical fact is that medieval wedding masses, especially for the well-off, could last hours, packed with prayers and blessings to sanctify the union before God. This wasn't just a ceremony. It was a spiritual gauntlet, ensuring the couple's marriage had divine approval. The priest's chants roll over you like a slow tide, each syllable heavy with meaning you can't quite grasp. Agnes and Thomas kneel at the altar, their heads bowed, though you catch Thomas sneaking a glance at his bride. You wonder if he's praying for love, or just for the strength to stay awake. The crowd's restless. Kids fidget. An old man coughs like he's auditioning for a Plague sequel, and you're already regretting that last cup of tart wine from the square. Here's the quirky tidbit. Some priests sprinkle crumbs of blessed bread into the couple's hands during the Mass, believing it would ensure fertility. You watch as the priest scatters crumbs over Agnes and Thomas, their palms cupped like they're catching rain. The crowd murmurs approval, but you overhear a snicker. Someone mutters the crumbs look like they've been swept off the church floor. You stifle a laugh. You're first of the section, imagining the priest dusting off yesterday's lunch for the occasion. Historians still argue whether this bread ritual was widespread or a local oddity. Some say it was a sacred symbol. Others claim it was just a way to use up stale loaves. The prayers drag on, and your knees ache from kneeling on the cold stone floor. You shift, trying to find a comfortable spot, but the pew's edge digs into your thighs like a medieval torture device. The priest's voice rises and falls, a monotonous hum that's oddly soothing, like a lullaby you can't escape. You glance around, noticing the villagers' faces, some devout, others glassy-eyed, probably dreaming of the feast to come. A woman nearby braids her daughter's hair absent-mindedly, echoing the ritual you saw in Agnes's preparation room. It's a small callback to that warm, rosemary-scented moment, but here it feels out of place, like a whisper in a storm. The stained glass light shifts, painting Agnes's veil in crimson hues. She looks serene, but you bet she's counting the minutes too. The priest launches into another psalm, and you catch a boy in the back mimicking him, lips flapping silently. There's your second laugh, his cheeky rebellion cutting through the solemnity. The air grows heavier, the incense thicker, and you feel your eyelids droop. It's not boredom, exactly. It's the weight of this endless ritual pressing you into the moment. You wonder how Agnes and Thomas are holding up. Kneeling for hours can't be fun in a heavy gown or borrowed boots. Then, a hiccup ripples through the crowd, literally. A man in a patched tunic, clearly deep into his wine, lets out a loud hic that echoes like a thunderclap. The priest pauses, glaring, and you bite your lip to keep from laughing. Third chuckle secured. The crowd shuffles, some giggling, others shushing, and you realize this church, for all its sanctity, is still a human place, full of flaws and fleeting joys. The prayers resume, and you notice a small detail. The priest's book is dog-eared, its pages yellowed. It's a reminder that this ritual, grand as it is part of a world worn by time and use. As the hours crawl by, you feel the crowd's anticipation building. The prayers are a hurdle, but the feast waits beyond, with its promise of roasted meat and more wine. You remember the shared cup and betrothal, the braids woven with whispers, the knot tied on the porch, each moment layering onto this one. Like stones in a cathedral wall, the priest raises his hands, signaling the end of another long prayer, and you exhale, your body begging for movement. Agnes and Thomas remain kneeling, their faces pale but resolute. You admire their grit. This isn't just a wedding. It's a marathon of faith, love, and sheer endurance. The church doors are still shut, but you know the next step is coming. The vows will be sealed, and the celebration will explode. For now, you lean back, letting the priest's voice wash over you like a river, carrying you deeper into the sacred, sleepy haze. You're still in the church, the weight of those endless prayers lingering like the faint haze of incense in the air. The stained glass glow has softened, and the crowd's restlessness is palpable as the priest finally signals a shift. You watch Agnes and Thomas rise from their knees, wincing slightly. 3 hours of kneeling would make anyone creak like an old cart. The altar is now the stage, and the moment you've been waiting for arrives. The sacred odes, the heart of the medieval wedding, where words bind tighter than any rope from the porch. You lean forward, the cold stone floor forgotten, as the couple faces each other, their hands trembling but clasped. The church is quieter now, the hiccups and whispers hushed, and you feel the gravity of what's about to unfold. The mainstream historical fact is that the exchange of vows during the wedding mass was a legal and spiritual core of a medieval marriage, especially in 14th century England. These weren't just promises. They were binding contracts under canon law, often memorized and recited with the priest's prompting. Agnes steps forward first, her voice cutting through the silence, promising to love, honor, and obey Thomas in sickness and in health. You notice her pause on obey, her lips twitching like she's swallowing a retort. Thomas follows, his voice steadier but still cracking on till death us do part. You can't help but smirk. First laugh of the section, imagining him practicing those words in a field, probably to a sheep who didn't care. Here's the quirky tidbit. In some regions, couples seal their oaths by touching a relic, like a saint's bone or a sliver of the true cross, believing it gave their marriage divine protection. You see the priest hold up a small silver box, supposedly containing a fragment of St. Cuthbert's cloak. Agnes and Thomas each place a hand on it, their fingers brushing the cold metal, and the crowd sighs in awe. You wonder if it's really a saint's relic or just a fancy prop. Either way, it's doing its job. Historians still argue whether this relic touching was a widespread practice or a regional flourish. Some say it was devout, others think it was a way for churches to flex their spiritual clout. The oaths feel heavy, like stones dropped into a still pond. You glance around, catching the faces of the crowd, some tearful, others skeptical. A woman near you adjusts her wimple, muttering about how Thomas better not squander Agnes's dowry on dice. The air smells of wax and wool, with a faint sweetness from the flowers woven into Agnes's braids, a call back to that rosemary-scented room where her hair was woven. The priest chants a blessing, his voice less droning now, more triumphant, as if he's finally earned his supper. You shift on your pew, your legs tingling, and realize this moment is a pivot. The chaos of the square, the braiding, the porch vows, the prayer marathon, all leading here. A child in the back drops a wooden toy, the clatter echoing like a tiny thunderbolt, and you stifle a chuckle, second laugh, at the priest's fleeting scowl. The crowd's tension eases slightly, but the weight of the oaths lingers. Agnes's veil catches a breeze from an open window, fluttering like a trapped bird, and you wonder what she's thinking. Is she relieved to be past the prayers, or daunted by the life these words have locked her into? Medieval marriages were often more about family strategy than love, and you bet her merchant father is already counting the profits of this alliance. The priest steps back, gesturing for the couple to face the crowd, their hands still touching the relic. You notice Thomas's shoulders relax, like he's just survived a joust. The crowd murmurs approval, though you catch a few sharp glances, maybe from Agnes's old suitors or Thomas's debts waiting in the wings. The relic is tucked away, and the priest begins another prayer, shorter this time. Thank goodness. You lean back, the pew creaking, and take a deep breath. The church feels alive, its walls holding centuries of promises like these. Someone passes you a small oat cake, probably left over from the breadcrumb ritual, and you nibble it, the grainy texture grounding you. Outside, you hear a faint lute strumming, a tease of the feast to come. You laugh quietly, third chuckle, imagining the juggler from the square try and keep up with the musicians. The oaths are done, but the day's far from over. You remember the wine cup and betrothal, the knot on the porch, the braids, the prayers, all threads weaving this moment into something eternal. The priest raises his hands, signaling the Mass's end, and the crowd stirs, eager for the feast. You're ready to, your stomach rumbling, but you know the celebration will bring its own kind of chaos. For now, you savor the quiet triumph of Agnes and Thomas, their vows echoing in the stone. You spill out of the church, the weight of sacred oaths and 3 hours of droning prayers lifting like morning mist. The village square pulses with new energy, the air thick with the scent of roasted meat and spilled wine. Tables groan under heaps of bread, cheese, and glistening haunches of venison, while casks of wine, more than you thought this village could afford, stand like sentinels. You're swept into the wedding feast. With the solemnity of Agnes and Thomas's vows gives way to a raucous celebration. The crowd is louder now, faces flushed as villagers and nobles alike jostle for seats. You snag a spot at a rickety table, dodging a splash of wine from a passing cup. This is where the day turns wild, where wine fuels joy and chaos in equal measure. The mainstream historical fact is that medieval wedding feasts were central to the celebration, often lasting hours or even days, serving as both a communal party and a display of wealth. For a merchant's daughter like Agnes, this spread is her family's chance of flex, Every loaf and cask screams status. You watch servants carve a massive boar, its crackling skin drawing cheers. The wine flows freely, a tart red that's probably local and definitely potent. You take a sip, wincing at its bite, but it warms your chest like a hearth. Agnes and Thomas sit at a high table, their faces glowing, though you catch Thomas eyeing the wine like it's an old friend. Here's the quirky tidbit. Some feasts included a bride's pie, a massive pastry hiding live birds, or even a dwarf to entertain the guests. You spot a towering pie being carried in, and the crowd roars as a servant slices it open. Out flutter a dozen sparrows, flapping wildly. One lands on a noble's hat, sparking laughter, your first chuckle of the section. Historians still argue whether these pies were common or just a rich man's gimmick. Some say they were standard at big weddings. Others think they were rare, showy stunts. Either way, the birds are a hit, though you're glad one doesn't dive into your wine. The feast is a sensory overload. Lutes and pipes strike up a jaunty tune, and villagers clap along, some already swaying. You tear into a hunk of bread, its crust flecked with herbs, and pair it with a slab of cheese that's sharper than the priest's glare. The crowd's chatter is a wall of sound, gossip about the dowry, jokes about Thomas's clumsy vows, and someone swearing they saw a fairy in the church. You laugh quietly, second chuckle, at a drunk uncle trying to dance with a broom, his wife dragging him away. The wine keeps coming, and you notice the crowd loosening, voices louder, gestures wilder. It's joyful but teetering on chaotic, like a cart rolling downhill. You glance at Agnes, her braid still perfect under her veil, a callback to that quiet room where rosemary and whispers shaped her. She's smiling, but her eyes dart to the crowd, maybe wary of the attention. Thomas, meanwhile, is deep in his cup, laughing with his mates. You wonder if they're already dreaming of the bedding ritual or just trying to survive the feast. The air smells of grease and sweetness now, with honeyed apples circulating on trays. A child darts by, snatching one, and you grin, third chuckle, imagining him bragging about his heist later. The feast isn't just about food. It's a social minefield. You overhear a merchant haggling with a noble over a trade deal, using the wedding as cover. Nearby, two women argue over who deserved Thomas's hand, their voices sharp enough to cut the bore. Weddings were networking events, and every bite comes with a side of politics. You remember the shared wine cup from betrothal, the knot on the porch, the relic's cold touch, each moment building to this explosion of communal joy. But there's an edge here, a sense that too much wine could tip the scales from merry to messy. A juggler from the square reappears, tossing flaming torches now, and the crowd gasps as one nearly singes a banner. You lean back, savoring the warmth of the wine and the pulse of the moment. The feast is a bridge between the church's solemnity and the rowdy rituals to come. Agnes and Thomas are the heart of it, but you're all part of the story, carried by laughter, music, and the ever-flowing wine. The sun dips lower, casting golden light over the tables, and you know the night's only getting started. You're still caught in the feast whirlwind, the taste of sharp cheese and tart wine lingering on your tongue as the village square hums with laughter and clinking cups. The sun has dipped, painting the sky in hues of amber, and torches now flicker, casting dancing shadows across the tables. The mood shifts as the music slows, the lutes weaving a softer melody. All eyes turn to Agnes, who rises on a high table, her crimson gown glowing like embers. It's time for the bride's dance, a ritual moment where she steps into the spotlight, her every move a delicate balance of grace, tradition, and unspoken defiance. You lean forward, the crowd's chatter fading, as she steps into cleared space, her veil trailing like a whisper. The mainstream historical fact is that the bride's dance was a key feature of many medieval wedding celebrations, particularly in England and France, symbolizing her transition into married life and her role as a wife. It wasn't just a performance. It was a public declaration of her poise and virtue, scrutinized by all. Agnes moved slowly at first, her steps measured, guided by the lute's plaintive notes. Her braids, woven with ribbons and rosemary from that intimate room, swayed gently, catching the torchlight. The crowd watches, some with awe, others with the sharp eyes of critics waiting for a misstep. You notice her hands tremble slightly, clutching the hem of her gown, and you feel a pang. Dancing for 100 judging faces can't be easy. Here's the quirky tidbit. In some regions, the bride's dance was believed to influence the couple's future harmony, with a flawless performance promising a peaceful marriage. You overhear an old woman muttering that a stumble could curse the union with strife. Agnes doesn't stumble, but her steps are cautious, like she's navigating a tightrope. Historians still argue whether this belief was taken seriously or just village gossip. Some say it was a heartfelt superstition. Others think it was an excuse to pressure the bride into perfection. You watch her spin, her gown flaring, and hope she's ignoring the old woman's grim predictions. The dance is mesmerizing, a slow swirl of silk and shadow. The musicians pick up the tempo, and Agnes adapts, her movements more confident now. You're struck by how alone she seems, even with every eye on her. Thomas watches in the high table, his wine cup forgotten, his face a mix of pride and something softer. Maybe love, maybe relief she hasn't tripped. You chuckle quietly. First laugh of the section, imagining him trying to join her and falling flat. The crowd claps in rhythm, and you join in, the sound building like a heartbeat. The air smells of smoke and crushed grass, with a faint sweetness from spilled honeyed apples still littering the tables. Agnes's dance isn't just about grace. It's a subtle act of defiance. You notice her chin lift slightly, her eyes meeting the crowd's gaze, as if daring them to find fault. Medieval women had little power. But here, in this fleeting moment, she commands the square. You remember the shared wine cup from the betrothal, the knot on the porch, the relic's cold touch, the feast's chaos, each a thread in this tapestry, now woven into her steps. A child near you mimics her moves, twirling clumsily, and you grin, second laugh, at her earnest imitation, her tiny shoes kicking up dust. The music swells, and Agnes spins faster, her veil catching the breeze like a sail. The crowd cheers, but you catch a few sharp whispers, maybe from rival families or jealous maids. Weddings were stages for envy as much as joy, and Agnes's poise is a challenge to some. A torch sputters, dropping sparks, and a man swats them away, cursing loudly enough to draw a giggle from you. Third laugh. The dance nears its end, and Agnes slows, her breath visible in the cooling air. She stops, facing Thomas, and curtsies deeply. The crowd erupts, tossing petals that flutter down like soft rain. You clap, your hands stinging, as Agnes returns to the high table, her face flushed but composed. Thomas takes her hand, and you wonder what they're whispering. The musicians strike up a livelier tune, inviting others to dance, but you're still caught in the spell of her solo. The square feels warmer now, the wine and torchlight blurring the edges of the world. You lean back, savoring a stolen sip of wine from a nearby cup. Sour but welcome. The bride's dance was a bridge between the feast's chaos and the rituals still to come, a moment of beauty in a day of excess. You know the night's far from over. Gifts, pranks, and rowdier traditions loom. But for now, you let Agnes's grace linger, a quiet triumph in the flickering light. You're still basking in the glow of Agnes's dance, the square alive with torchlight and the hum of lutes as the wedding feast roars on. The air is thick with the scent of roasted meat and wine-soaked earth, and the crowd's energy has a new edge, looser, bolder, fueled by hours of drinking. You're pulled toward a cleared space near the high table, where a pile of treasures glitters under the flickering flames. It's time for the gift-giving ceremony, a spectacle where generosity meets politics, and every offering is a calculated move in the village's social chess game. You settle onto a bench, dodging a tipsy villager who nearly spills his cup on you, and brace for a display that's as much about power as it is about celebration. The mainstream historical fact is that gift-giving at medieval weddings, especially in 14th century England, was a public ritual that reinforced alliances and showcased wealth. For a merchant family like Agnes's, this is their moment to shine, but it's also a chance for guests to stake their own claims to status. You watch as Agnes and Thomas stand beside the growing pile, their faces a mix of gratitude and mild panic, probably wondering how to repay all this. The first gift comes from Agnes's father, a stout man with a hedgehog beard, who presents a carved oak chest filled with linens. The crowd murmurs approval, though you overhear someone whisper it's smaller than last year's dowry chest. Ouch! The linens are fine, embroidered with flowers, a nod to the rosemary woven into Agnes's braids from that quiet room. Here's the quirky tidbit. In some regions, guests gave live animals as gifts, believing they brought luck or fertility to the couple. You blink as a farmer leads in a bleating goat, its horns tied with ribbons, and hands a rope to Thomas. The goat promptly chews a corner of his doublet, sparking laughter, your first chuckle of the section. Thomas tries to look dignified, but it's a losing battle. Historians still argue whether animal gifts were practical or symbolic. Some say they were just livestock for the couple's new household. Others think they were quirky charms against barrenness. Either way, you're glad the goat's not your problem. The gifts keep coming, each one a performance. A noble in velvet offers a silver goblet, holding it aloft like he's gifting the Holy Grail. You roll your eyes, second laugh, at his theatrics, suspecting he's angling for a favor from Agnes's father. A weaver's wife presents a bolt of blue wool, its dye so rich it must have cost her a month's wages. You notice Agnes's eyes soften, maybe touched by the sacrifice. The pile grows, candlesticks, a bronze pot, a pair of iron tongs, even a sack of apples that rolls open, sending fruit bouncing across the dirt. A child scrambles to grab one, and you grin, third laugh, as his mother hauls him back by his tunic. The ceremony isn't just about generosity. It's a high-stakes game. You overhear a merchant muttering about a rival's paltry gift. A single spoon, really? And realize every offering is being judged, cataloged, and gossiped about. Weddings were battlegrounds for social climbing, and a weak gift could haunt you for years. You remember the shared wine cup from betrothal, the knot on the porch, the relic's touch, Agnes's dance, each moment building this web of obligation and display. The goat bleats again, and Thomas nudges it toward a servant, his smile strained. You wonder if he's mentally tallying the debts this pile represents. The air smells of wax and wood smoke now, the torches burning low. A servant passes you a slice of honey bread, its sweetness cutting to the wine's sour aftertaste. The gift-giving slows, but the crowd's buzz doesn't. You notice a few sharp glances, maybe from families who couldn't afford to give much, or others who gave too much and now regret it. Agnes's father beams, clearly pleased with the haul, but you catch Agnes stealing a glance at Thomas, her expression unreadable. Is she overwhelmed, or just ready for this part to end? The final gift is a small iron key, presented by an old woman who claims it unlocks a chest of wisdom. The crowd chuckles, half mocking, but Agnes accepts it with grace. You lean back, savoring the bread, as the ceremony wraps up. The gifts are a bridge to the night's rowdier rituals, a moment of calculated splendor before the wine fuels mischief. You know the chaos is coming, but for now, you're caught in the glitter of silver and the bleat of that ridiculous goat, the square pulsing with the weight of promises made and debts owed. You're still in the heart of the wedding feast, the square aglow with torchlight as the gift-giving ceremony fades into a haze of clinking cups and raucous laughter. The pile of treasures, linens, goblets, and that stubborn goat sits proudly near the high table, But the mood has shifted. The wine, that tart, herb-spiked brew, flows like a river now, loosening tongues and sparking mischief. You're leaning against a wooden post, nibbling on a stolen apple from the gift pile, when the crowd's energy takes a rowdy turn. Shouts and giggles erupt as a group of young men. Faces flushed in tunics ask you, start a game of tossing bread crusts at each other. This is the moment where wine-fueled pranks take over, and you're about to dodge some medieval mayhem. The mainstream historical fact is that medieval wedding feasts often included playful, sometimes chaotic pranks, especially as the night wore on and wine eroded inhibitions. These weren't just for fun. They reinforced community bonds, letting off steam in a world bound by rigid rules. You watch a lanky lad, probably Thomas's cousin, sneak behind a dozing noble and tie his belt to a bench. When the noble tries to stand, he nearly topples, his wine cup flying. Your first laugh of the section. The crowd roars, and you can't help but grin at the sheer audacity. Agnes and Thomas, still at the high table, exchange a glance, her eyes wide, his amused but wary. Here's the quirky tidbit. In some villages, pranks included stealing the bride's shoe, with the thief demanding a ransom, usually more wine or a kiss. You spot a grinning boy crawling under the table, eyeing Agnes's embroidered slipper. He tugs it off before she notices, waving it like a trophy. The crowd cheers and Agnes laughs, though you bet she's annoyed. There's your second chuckle, imagining her chasing him barefoot. Historians still argue whether these pranks were harmless fun or subtle power plays. Some say they were just revelry. Others think they tested the couple's patience under pressure. The square is a whirlwind now. A juggler from earlier, clearly deep in his cups, tries juggling apples and drops them all, one smack a merchant's forehead. Third laugh, and you're wiping tears. The wine makes everything louder, Messier. You dodge a splash as two men wrestle over a spilled cask, their curses drowned by lute music. The air smells of sour wine and trampled grass, with a faint sweetness from the honey bread still circulating. You remember the shared cup and betrothal, the knot on the porch, the relic's touch, Agnes's dance, the glittering gifts, all building to this chaotic peak. The pranks feel like a release, a way to shake off the church's solemnity and the gift-giving's politics. You notice Agnes whispering to Thomas, maybe about the stolen shoe or the growing rowdiness. Her braids, still laced with rosemary, gleam under the torches, a callback to that quiet room where she was woven into a bride. Thomas laughs, but his eyes scan the crowd, perhaps sensing the mischief could tip into trouble. Weddings were magnets for grudges, and too much wine could spark a brawl. You overhear a woman scolding her husband for flirting with a maid, her voice sharp enough to cut through the noise. Another man boasts about outdrinking Thomas's uncle, who's now slumped against a barrel, snoring like a bear. The pranksters don't stop. A group of lads douse a sleeping dog with wine, and it bolts awake, yapping and scattering a tray of pies. The crowd howls, and you're caught between cringing and laughing. The dog's owner, a red-faced farmer, chases it, tripping over a bench and landing in a pile of straw. You lean back, savoring your apple, its tartness grounding you in the madness. The pranks are a bridge to the next ritual, the bedding ceremony, and you can feel the crowd's anticipation building. Agnes's shoe is returned after the boy gets his wine, and she slips it on, her smile tight but polite. The torches burn lower, casting wild shadows, and the music picks up, urging the crowd to dance. You stay put, watching the chaos swirl. The wine has turned the feast into a living beast, unpredictable and loud. You wonder how Agnes and Thomas are holding up, their love or duty tested by this rowdy tide. The night's not done. More rituals loom, and you know the crowd's mischief is far from spent. For now, you clutch your apple, dodge another splash of wine, and let the laughter carry you deeper into this wild medieval night. The square is a riot of laughter and spilled wine, the torchlight flickering as the feast's mischief reaches a fever pitch. You're still chuckling over that poor dog drenched in wine, its yapping fading into the din of lutes and shouts. The air is heavy with the scent of straw, roasted meat, and that ever-present tart wine, but the crowd's energy shifts again, growing louder, rowdier. You're swept along as a group of revelers, some swaying, others downright stumbling, forms a boisterous procession. They're heading toward Agnes and Thomas, who stand at the high table, their faces a mix of amusement and dread. It's time for the bedding ritual, a tradition that teeters on the edge of scandal, and you're about to see just how wild this medieval wedding can get. The mainstream historical fact is that the bedding ceremony was a common feature of medieval weddings, especially among the gentry and merchant classes in 14th century England. It involved escorting the couple to their marital bed, often with much fanfare and crude humor, to symbolize the consummation of the marriage. You watch as a crowd, led by Thomas's rowdy cousins, hoists the couple onto their shoulders. Well, tries to. Thomas nearly slips, grabbing a torch for balance, and you stifle a laugh, first chuckle of the section at his flailing. Agnes clings to her veil, her braids still gleaming with rosemary, a callback to that quiet room where she was prepared. The procession lurches forward, a chaotic parade through the square toward a nearby house. Here's the quirky tidbit. In some regions, the bedding ritual included tossing grain or herbs onto the bed to ensure fertility, a practice tied to ancient pagan roots. You see an older woman, probably an aunt, scattering barley over the couple's path, muttering blessings or maybe just complaints about the noise. The crowd cheers, though a few grains at you in the face, and you grin, second laugh, brushing them off like medieval glitter. Historians still argue whether this grain tossing was purely symbolic or a practical wish for a bountiful household. Some say it was devout, others think it was a cheeky nod to the couple's duties. The procession is a spectacle, equal parts joyful and absurd. You're pulled along, dodging a slosh of wine from a drunken reveler's cup. The crowd sings a bawdy song about a farmer and his plow, the lyrics making you blush and laugh, third chuckle at their brazenness. Agnes and Thomas are ushered into a small house, its door festooned with ribbons. Inside, you glimpse a bed draped in linen, candles casting a warm glow. The crowd doesn't follow. Thankfully, there's some decorum, but they linger outside, shouting jests and toasting the couple's future. You hear someone yell about a son by next harvest, and Agnes's cheeks flush, though she manages a smile. The ritual feels like a tightrope walk between celebration and intrusion. You remember the shared wine cup and betrothal, the knot on the porch, the relic's touch, Agnes's dance, the glittering gifts, the pranks, all leading to this intimate yet public moment. The crowd's humor is crude but warm, a way to bless the couple while poking fun at their nerves. You notice Thomas's mate slapping his back, their laughter loud but kind, while Agnes's maids giggle, whispering behind their hands. The air smells of wax and barley now, the torches outside sputtering as the night deepens. You lean against the house's wall, catching your breath. The bedding ritual is less about romance and more about community. Everyone has a stake in this marriage, from Agnes's merchant father to the farmer who gifted that ornery goat. You overhear a woman gossiping about a past bedding where the groom got so drunk he fell asleep before the door closed, and you smirk, imagining Thomas's fate if he downs another cup. The crowd begins to disperse, some heading back to the feast, others lingering to sing. You feel a strange mix of warmth and unease. This ritual binds Agnes and Thomas, but also lays their lives bare to the village's eyes. The door shuts, and the shouts fade to a murmur. You step back into the square, where the feast continues, though quieter now. A servant offers you a cup of watered-down wine, and you sip it, its sourness grounding you. The bedding marks a turning point, a shift from public spectacle to private promise. though you know the priest's final blessing awaits. For now, you let the night's chaos settle, the memory of Agnes's flushed cheeks and Thomas's nervous grin lingering like the scent of barley in the air. You're back in the square, the bedding ritual's rowdy echoes fading as the crowd drifts back to the feast, their voices softer but still buzzing with wine-fueled energy. The torches burn low, casting long shadows across the trampled grass, and the air carries the mingled sense of cooling meat, spilled wine, and wax from dwindling candles. You find a spot near a barrel, your legs grateful for a moment's rest, as the mood shifts towards something weightier. The priest, that hawk-faced figure from the church, steps forward again, his robes slightly rumpled from the night's chaos. It's time for his final blessing, a solemn capstone to seal Agnes and Thomas's union under God's watchful eye. You brace yourself. After the pranks and bawdy songs, this feels like stepping back into the church's heavy air. The mainstream historical fact is that the priest's final blessing at a medieval wedding was a critical ritual, often performed after the bedding to sanctify the marriage and invoke divine protection for the couple's future. In 14th century England, this blessing was seen as a spiritual seal, ensuring the union's legitimacy in the eyes of both God and community. The priest raises his hands, his voice cutting through the chatter, calling for silence. You watch Agnes and Thomas, summoned from the house, stand before him, their faces flushed. Whether from wine, nerves, or the bedding's implications, you can't tell. Agnes's braids, still laced with rosemary from that quiet room, gleam faintly, a callback to her transformation into a bride. Here's the quirky tidbit. In some regions, the priests sprinkle holy water mixed with wine during the blessing, believing it linked the couple's sacred vows to the communal joy of the feast. You see him dip his fingers into a small silver bowl, flicking droplets over the couple. A stray splash hits a nearby child who giggles. Your first laugh of the section, wiping his face like he's been doused with ale. Historians still argue whether this wine-water mix was a common practice or a local flourish. Some say it symbolized unity. Others think it was just a way to stretch the holy water budget. The blessing is slow, deliberate, the priest's Latin rolling like a river over crowd. You catch fragments, pax, amor fidelitas, but the meaning lies in the weight, not the words. The crowd stands hushed, even the drunkest villagers bowing their heads. You feel the gravity, the sense that this moment anchors everything. The shared cup from betrothal, the knot on the porch, the relics touch, Agnes's dance, the gifts, the pranks, the bedding. It's all led here, to this quiet act of faith. You notice Agnes's hand in Thomas's, her knuckles white, and wonder she's praying for strength or just relief that the day's almost done. The priest's voice rises, and you shift, your back aching from standing so long. A dog, the same one doused in wine earlier, slinks by, sniffing for scraps, and you smile, second laugh, at its hopeful swagger. The blessing feels endless, but there's beauty in its rhythm, like a heartbeat slowing the night's pulse. You glance at the crowd, catching a mix of reverence and impatience. A merchant whispers to his wife, probably about trade deals sealed over the feast chaos, while a young girl clutches a ribbon from Agnes's veil, stolen during the dance. The air smells of damp earth now, the torches nearly spent, and you feel the night settling into something deeper. The priest finishes, raising the silver bowl high, and the crowd murmurs in amen. That's more reflex than devotion. You join in, your voice lost in the chorus. Thomas and Agnes bow, their faces tired but serene, and you can't help but admire their endurance. The priest tucks the bowl away, and a servant passes you a crust of bread, probably leftover from the feast's success. You nibble it, its dryness a contrast to the wine's lingering tang. A man nearby trips over a stool, muttering a curse before laughing. Your third chuckle, and the crowd's solemnity cracks, easing back into chatter. This blessing feels like a bridge to the night's final acts, A moment of calm before the music and farewells take over. You remember the goat from the gift pile, bleeding its way into chaos, and wonder if it's still tied up somewhere. The square is quieter now. The wine cask's nearly empty, but the celebration's warmth lingers. Agnes and Thomas step back, their hands still linked, and you sense the weight of their new life settling in. The priest retreats, his job done, and you know the night's about to shift again. Music and dancing await, but for now, you savor the stillness, the echo of sacred words in the flickering dark. You're still in the village square, the priest's final blessing fading into the cool night air, leaving a hush of a crowd that feels like a collective exhale. The torches are nearly spent, their embers glowing faintly, and the scent of wine and roasted meat lingers, now mingling with the crispness of dew on grass. The mood shifts as a lone lute player plucks a gentle tune, joined soon by a drum's soft thud. The music swells, pulling the crowd from the blessing solemnity into a new wave of celebration. You're drawn into the rhythm, your feet tapping as villagers begin to sway and spin. This is the moment when music fills the night, carrying the wedding's joy into the starry hours, and you're about to lose yourself in its pulse. The mainstream historical fact is that music and dancing were central to medieval wedding celebrations, especially after the formal rituals, serving as a communal release and a way to honor the couple. In 14th century England, lutes, pipes, and drums were common, with tunes ranging from sacred to downright bawdy. You watch as a group of musicians, their tunics stained with wine, strike up a lively melody. Agnes and Thomas step into cleared space, their first dance as a married couple drawing cheers. Agnes's gown swirls, her braids, still woven with rosemary from that quiet room, catching the moonlight. Thomas, less graceful, stumbles but recovers, grinning sheepishly, and you chuckle. First laugh of the section at his earnest effort. Here's the quirky tidbit. In some villages, the wedding dance included a circle of unity, where guests joined hands around the couple, believing it wove their blessings into the marriage. You see the crowd form a loose ring, hands clasped, swaying to the beat. An old man, clearly too deep in his wine, trips into the circle, nearly toppling a maid. Your second laugh as she shoves him back with a playful scowl. Historians still argue whether this circle was a widespread tradition or a regional quirk. Some say it was a sacred act. Others think it was just an excuse to keep dancing. Either way, you're tempted to join, but you stay put, savoring the view. The music is infectious, a mix of haunting notes and foot-stomping rhythm. You notice villagers of all ages weaving through the square, children spinning in clumsy circles, elders swaying with surprising grace. The air smells of earth and smoke now, the feast remnants cooling on tables. You grab a stray apple from a nearby pile, its tartness a sharp contrast to the wine's lingering warmth. The crowd's energy is lighter than during the pranks or gift-giving, but there's still an edge. You overhear a woman whispering about a rival family's absence from the dance, a snub that'll fuel gossip for weeks. Agnes and Thomas move together, their steps more confident now. You catch a rare moment, her smile, genuine this time, as Thomas whispers something that makes her laugh. You wonder if it's a private joke, or just relief at surviving the day. The memory of the shared wine cup, the porch knot, the relic's touch, the bride's dance, the bedding ritual, all weave into this moment, like threads in a tapestry. The music shifts, faster now, and the circle breaks as more join the dance. A boy twirls a stick like it's a partner, and you grin, third laugh, at his carefree swagger, dodging a stern mother's glare. The night feels alive, the stars above sharper in the cooling air. You lean against a post, the drums beat thrumming in your chest. The dance is a bridge between the day's weighty rituals and the farewells to come, a moment of pure joy before the wedding's end. You notice Agnes's father watching, his face softened now, maybe proud or just tired. The musicians play on, their fingers flying, and you feel the urge to move, to join the swirl of bodies. A servant passes with a tray of honey bread, and you snag a piece, its sweetness grounding you in the moment. The crowd's laughter rises, blending with the music, and you realize this is the wedding's heart. Not the vows or blessings, but this shared, fleeting joy. The torches flicker out one by one, but the dance continues, fueled by starlight and wine-soaked spirits. You know the night's winding down, that dawn and farewells are near, but for now, you let the music carry you, the square alive with the pulse of a community bound by song and celebration. The music's rhythm still hums in your bones as the dance winds down, the lute softening to a gentle pluck, and the drum's beat fading like a slowing pulse. The square, bathed in starlight now, feels quieter, the torches reduced to glowing embers. The air is cooler, carrying the scent of dew-soaked grass and the faint tang of wine-soaked earth. You're leaning against a weathered post, munching the last of that honey bread, when you notice the crowd's energy shift, less frenetic, more tense. The wedding's joy has masked undercurrents of rivalry, and now, with the wine flowing freely, old grudges bubble up. You're about to witness the clash of guests, where wine and pride threaten to upend the feast's harmony. The mainstream historical fact is that medieval weddings, especially in 14th century England, were often flashpoints for social tensions, as families and factions mingled under the guise of celebration. A wedding like Agnes and Thomas's, tying a merchant's daughter to a knight's son, was a stage for alliances but also for settling scores. You spot trouble brewing near a cask, where two men, one in a fine velvet doublet, the other in rough wool, stand too close, their voices sharp. The velvet-clad man, likely a minor noble, gestures wildly, accusing the other short him on a grain deal. The crowd parts, sensing a storm, and you lean forward, your bread forgotten. Here's the quirky tidbit. In some villages, wedding disputes were settled with ritual mock duel, where rivals traded insults or tossed bread instead of blows to avoid bloodshed. You watch as the wool-clad man, red-faced and swaying, lobs a crust at the noble, who dodges it with surprising grace. The crowd laughs. Your first chuckle the section at the absurdity, but the tension holds. Historians still argue whether these mock duels were common or just local quirks. Some say they were a practical way to defuse fights. Others think they were just drunken antics dressed up as tradition. Either way, the crust lands in a child's lap, who munches it happily. Your second laugh. The argument escalates, voices rising over the fading music. You catch snippets. Something about a promised betrothal snubbed years ago, maybe tied to Agnes's family. The noble's hand hovers near his belt, where a knife might be, and you tense, remembering how weddings could spark real violence. A woman, maybe the wool-clad man's sister, steps in, shoving a cup of wine into his hand, and hissing at him to hush. The crowd murmurs, some egging them on, others calling for peace. You notice Agnes and Thomas at the high table, their faces tight, probably praying this doesn't ruin their night. Agnes's braids, still laced with rosemary from that quiet room, gleam faintly, a callback to the day's gentler moments. The mock duel fizzles as the noble storms off, muttering about merchant scum. You exhale relieved and snag another sip of wine from a passing tray, sour but steadying. The square feels fragile, like a tapestry fraying at the edges. You remember the shared cup and betrothal, the porch knot, the relic's touch, Agnes's dance, the gifts, the pranks, the betting, the blessing, the music, all building to this teetering moment. A drunk uncle stumbles into a table, knocking over a jug, and you grin, third laugh, as he blames the stars for his clumsiness. The musicians strike up a soft tune, try and pull the crowd back to joy, but the air's changed. You overhear whispers of other grudges. A maid slighted by a noble's wife, a farmer owed coin by Agnes's father. Weddings were as much about settling debts as celebrating love, and the wine has loosened lips too much. You watch a group of women gossip, their eyes darting to the noble now sulking by a cask. The square's still beautiful, starlight glinting off scattered petals, but you feel the weight of human flaws beneath the revelry. As the music plays on, you lean back, the post cool against your shoulders. The clash didn't erupt into fists, but it's a reminder that this wedding, for all its rituals, is a human affair, messy and raw. Dawn's not far off, and you know the final farewells are coming. For now, you savor the wine's bite and the music's faint hum, letting the night's tensions linger like shadows, ready to fade with the first light. The square's tension from that near brawl lingers like the faint smoke of dying torches, but the music's soft persistence and the cooling night air begin to soothe the crowd. The stars burn brighter now, casting a silver glow over the trampled grass and scattered petals, and the scent of dew mingles with the fading aroma of wine and roasted meat. You're still by that weathered post, your borrowed wine cup empty, as the wedding's final hours unfold. Dawn's first light is creeping closer, painting the horizon a faint pink, and you feel the weight of the day settling into your bones. This is a moment when the wedding's last rituals emerge, quiet but profound, signaling the start of Agnes and Thomas's new life together. You watch, caught in a hush, as the couple steps forward for a final act of unity. The mainstream historical fact is that medieval weddings often ended with a dawn ritual, especially among merchant and gentry families in 14th century England, where the couple shared a symbolic act, like breaking bread or planting a seed, to mark their shared future. You see Agnes and Thomas, weary but composed, standing near a small wooden table set with a loaf of bread and a clay pot. Agnes's braids, still laced with rosemary from that long-ago room, are slightly frayed now, a callback to her transformation into a bride. Thomas breaks the loaf, handing half to Agnes, and they each take a bite, the crowd murmuring approval. The act feels simple but heavy, like a vow renewed in silence. Here's the quirky tidbit. In some villages, couples planted a sprig of herbs during the dawn ritual, believing it would grow with their marriage. You watch as Agnes kneels, tucking a sprig of thyme into the pot's soil, her hand steady despite the long night. Thomas covers it with earth, and a child nearby claps, thinking it's a game, your first laugh of the section. Historians still argue whether this planting was a widespread custom or a poetic flourish. Some say it was a practical wish for prosperity. Others think it was a romantic nod to growth and endurance. You hope the thyme thrives, unlike that poor goat from the gift pile, probably still chewing someone's sleeve. The crowd is smaller now, the rowdiest guests either snoring under tables or gone home. Those who remain, family, close friends, and you, stand in a loose circle, their faces softened by the dawn's glow. The air feels cleaner, the wine's sour edge replaced by the earth's quiet scent. You notice Agnes's father, his hedgehog beard drooping, watching with a rare tenderness. The ritual feels intimate, a stark contrast to the feast's chaos or the bedding's bawdy roar. You remember the shared cup and betrothal, the porch knot, the relic's touch, Agnes's dance, the gifts, the pranks, the blessing, the music, the clashes, all weaving into this gentle moment, like a river finding its calm. A bird chirps, its call sharp in the stillness, and you smile, second laugh, at a sleepy villager jerking awake, thinking it's a horn. The musicians have stopped, their lutes silent, but the dawn's own music, wind, birds, the rustle of leaves, takes over. Agnes and Thomas stand, their hands brushing as they step back from the table. You catch a fleeting look between them, not the nervous glances of the church or the flushed grins of the feast, but something quieter, maybe the first seed of trust. The crowd claps softly, petals falling from someone's hands, and you join in, your palms warm despite the chill. A servant passes with a tray of oat cakes, and you grab one, its grainy texture grounding you. The dawn ritual is a bridge to the farewells, a moment of hope before the guests depart. You notice a woman wiping tears, maybe Agnes's mother, and a man muttering about the road home. The square feels like a held breath, poised between the night's revelry and the day's reality. A dog, the wine-doused one from earlier, trots by, tail wagging, and you chuckle, third laugh, as it sniffs the time pot, clearly unimpressed. The light grows, turning the sky to gold, and you feel the wedding story nearing its close. Agnes and Thomas are no longer just a bride and groom. They're a couple, bound by bread and earth, ready to face whatever lies ahead. The crowd begins to stir, preparing to leave, but you linger, savoring the dawn's soft promise. The night's chaos feels distant now, a tapestry of memory woven with wine, ritual, and prayer. You know the farewells are next, but for this moment, you let the time's quiet hope fill the air. The dawn's golden light spills over the square, softening the edges of the weary crowd as the scent of time and dew lingers in the cool air. You're still by that weathered post, the oatcake's crumbs dusting your fingers, watching Agnes and Thomas stand together, their hands brushing after quiet ritual of bread and planting. The wedding's final moments are here, a gentle unwinding as guests prepare to depart. Their faces heavy with wine and exhaustion, but warm with the day's shared joy. You feel the weight of the long night, vows, dances, pranks, and prayers, settling into a soft farewell as the couple faces their future under the rising sun. This is the moment of whispered goodbyes, where the community's embrace loosens, leaving Agnes and Thomas to step into their new life. The mainstream historical fact is that medieval weddings in 14th century England often ended with formal farewells, where guests offered blessings or small tokens to the couple before leaving, reinforcing communal ties. You watch as villagers approach Agnes and Thomas, some pressing coins or ribbons into their hands, others murmuring wishes for health and children. Agnes's braids, frayed but still laced with rosemary from that distant room, catch the morning light, a call back to her transformation. Thomas, his doublet rumpled, nods gratefully, though his eyes are bleary, probably from wine and lack of sleep. You smile, imagining him dreaming of a nap. First laugh of the section. Here's the quirky tidbit. In some regions, departing guests tied a ribbon to the couple's gate, believing it carried their blessings for prosperity. You see an old woman, her hands gnarled, not a faded blue strip to a nearby fence, muttering about a long marriage. A child mimics her, tying a twig instead, and you chuckle, second laugh, at his earnest confusion. Historians still argue whether this ribbon tying was widespread or a local custom. Some say it was a heartfelt gesture. Others think it was a way to mark who attended for future favors. Either way, the fence is soon a patchwork of color, fluttering like a silent prayer. The crowd thins, families gathering their cloaks and baskets, their voices low but warm. You catch snippets of chatter, gossip about the noble's tantrum, praise for Agnes's dance, bets on how long that goat from the gift pile will behave. The air feels lighter now, the wine's sour edge gone, replaced by the clean scent of morning. You lean back, your post a steady anchor, and watch Agnes's mother embrace her, tears glinting. Thomas's father slaps his shoulder, whispering something that makes him laugh, a rare, unguarded sound. You wonder what lies ahead for them, bound by bread, time, and a village's hopes. A stray dog, the wine-soaked one from pranks, noses a fallen ribbon, then trots off, tail high, and you grin. Third laugh at its carefree exit. The farewells continue, slow and deliberate, each guest a thread in the wedding's tapestry. You remember the shared cup, the porch knot, the relic's touch, the dance, the gifts, the bedding, the blessing, the music, the clashes, the dawn ritual, all weaving into this quiet goodbye. A servant offers you a final oatcake, and you take it. Its warmth a small comfort. The square feels empty now, save for the couple and a few lingering souls. As the last guests depart, you notice Agnes and Thomas alone at last, their hands linked, staring at the horizon. The time pot sits nearby, a small promise of growth. You feel a pang. This isn't just a wedding's end, but beginning, fragile and new. The sun climbs higher, warming your face, and you know it's time to go. Wind down. The square is nearly silent now, the last ribbons fluttering on the fence, their colors soft in the morning's glow. You take a slow breath, letting the day's whirlwind, wine, vows, laughter, and prayers settle into your heart like dust after storm. Agnes and Thomas stand together, their silhouettes small against a rising sun, and you feel a quiet reassurance. They faced a village's scrutiny, a priest's marathon, a night of chaos, and emerge hand in hand. The time will grow or it won't, but their story is theirs now, unfolding beyond the square's embrace. You turn away, the grass cool under your feet, and let the world fade to whispers. Petals falling, a bird's faint call, the hum of a distant breeze. Close your eyes, let the warmth of dawn wrap around you, and drift into the peace of a new day. Sweet dreams.